All right. So in the last session, we have discussed about what Java is, Java features, Ja- uh, Java history, the version history, like how Java evolved from the beginning. So we discussed that, and we have seen like the main components of Java: JDK, JRE, JVM, and also like we have seen how to install JDK. We have seen how to download it and install it, and we have seen like how to set the Java path, and we installed Eclipse, and we have written some simple Java programs as well. So hope you actually practice the same. You install Java, Eclipse, and practice the same. So I suggest that you practice each session. So once the session is done, so you have to, watch the recording and practice the sessions, whatever has been discussed in the sessions. And also you should be trying to complete the assignments on the same day. So that's strongly recommended. So coming to today's session, so we are going to discuss about variables and data types in this session. What are Java variables and data types? Well, variable is a container. So what is a variable is? A variable is a container which can store different kinds of information. Say, for example, on your machine. So you might be having a lot of information. Say, for example, you might be having a recording, or you might be having some video of yours. So to store that on the laptop, you need some memory, right? So in the same way, like in order to store information, different kinds of information within Java, so we need some variables. So that is what we call it as variable. So variable is a container. You can think it as a container which can store different kinds of information. Like it can store numbers, text, and more information. So it's a container which can store different kinds of information. So that is what we call it as a variable. So usually what we call like this. So in mathematics, in school, like if you say like this, so we call this as symbols, right? Usually we call in mathematics like X, Y, Z, X equal to 100. This we can call it as some symbol, right? Y is one symbol like that. So in the same way, here in Java, you call this as variables. So this is one variable, X is one variable. You can assign some value to it, right? So say for example, X equal to 10. So this is what we call it as a variable. Y equal to 20 is one variable. So what Y is doing here, Y is named as a variable, and it acts as a container to store some information. So in this case, it is storing some number called 20. So X is another container which is storing some information as a number 10. It is stored in X. So in the same way, we can have n number of variables defined in Java, and we can assign some related information into those variables. Say for example, and X equal to Y, and G equal to 30, like this. And in the same way, say for example, I can store some name also like this. So numbers, text, and any other information, if you wanted to hold it, so that can be held by a variable in Java. So this is what the use of variable, and why we need variable. We'll see it. We'll see it later. Now, in order to hold this data, right? So we need to say what type of data the variable is holding. So if you simply say like this, X equal to 10, Java will not understand it. We have to say what type of data you're storing in that variable. So that is what we call it as data type. So if you declare X equal to 10, so Java will not understand like what I have to store X. So please tell me what this type of data this variable is going to hold is what Java expects. So in that case, we need to actually specify the data type for that variable. Meaning, so when you are saying that I am going to have some variable called X, and if you are not going to assign this data or assign the data, but still Java needs to understand what type of data you are going to store in that variable. So it expects that. Say for example, you are going to store some integers, numbers, but integer type of data. Then we need to declare your variable x as int. So that's the syntax of in Java, right? So in the same way, let's say for example, I wanted to store y as an integer, then int y, right? So this is how we need to declare the variables and specify the data type for the variable. So if you see here, if we say int x equal to 10 here, uh, here x int is the data type, x is the variable, 10 is the value. 10 is the value assigned to x, or we can say literal assigned to x. So this is about variable, and the variable holds some data, and to in order to variable to hold data, so it has to be declared. It has to have some data type, just to know Java that what type of data it is gonna hold, and why we need this also we are going to discuss in few minutes, right? So in the same way, like we can have this for integers, right? So in the same way, if I wanted to store decimals, so what are decimals? Decimals are the like same as integers, but they do have some decimal point, and we do have some precision as well. Say for example, I have some price. I have bought some item, and I wanted to store its price. Say for example, the price of it is 19.99. So in such case, we can actually use a data type, another data type called float. So because this says that Java that the price is a variable where I am going to store information called information numbers, but it's not an integer type. So I'm going to store information of decimal numbers is what we are seeing Java by declaring price variable data type as float. So there is another type called double. So where we can store same decimal numbers. So this is about the numbers. Now, if we take strings, like say, for example, I wanted to store some sequence of characters. These are all numbers, right? So if I wanted to store some sequence of characters from, let's say, for example, names. Smith is a name, right? So name is one variable, and I have stored some value in it, right? Now, in order to store that, we have to declare this variable as string, because Smith is a string. And also in Java, always remember string is always enclosed in double quotations. String is always enclosed in double quotes. No, we do have other data types like, in order to store single character. So we do have another data type. Say, for example, I wanted to store some data like grade, student grade. So student has different grades, right? A, B, C, something like that. So say for example, I wanted to store a grade called B. So such data, single character data, has to be declared as a data type char, and it has always to be enclosed in single quotes. So here grade is a variable which is of character data type. Character data type in the sense it can only store one character, only one character. And that also it has to be enclosed in single quotations. So you can clearly see this, right? So if you see the difference, string, it has a sequence of characters. It can have n number of characters. And when it is declared as string, it has to be enclosed in double quotation. Coming to character, so in order to, if you wanted to store only one character, then it has to be declared as char data type. The variable has to be declared as char data type, and it has to be enclosed in single quotes. So this, like this, we do have some other data types in Java. So before looking into that, so let's actually see an example on variables, and how to declare variables, how to initialize them, and what are the naming conventions of variables. We'll see an example on that. Let me open my Eclipse. So this is my Eclipse, and we have seen two programs on day one, right? When we created when we installed Eclipse, so we created a project, we created a package, and within package we created classes, right? So in the same way, I'm going to create another package today. So that's a hierarchy: project, package, and class. Now today I'm going to create another package. I'll call it as day2. So in the same way, whenever we wanted to create classes daily in the session, so I'll name each day I'm gonna create one package and create the class examples in that package. So it's up to you. You can name whatever package you want, or if you are not comfortable, you can actually have all these examples, class examples, in only one package as well. It's all up to us. Just to organize in a better way, I'm creating each day one package, and we'll call it day2 for today. All right, now let me create a new class, and I'm gonna call this as variables example. And we know that we learned in Java, so without writing a class, we can't write the code, right? So we should definitely have a class. So we are going to create a class now. And if you observe, in the last session, we discussed about the conventions of class name. So a class name should be camel case letters. And the first, in the word in the class name, so if there are more than one word, so each word, the first character has to be uppercase. And also we have seen, so the execution of JVM starts from the main method. So a class is can be called as like class holds members and methods. So main is one method. So it's a special kind of method where actually JVM knows the execution to start, right? So I'm taking main method here. Just select this and click on finish. We can just remove this. So why do we need this main method is, there could be a number of methods within the class, but JVM has to know where it has to start the execution from. So main is the method where the actual execution starts from. So this is the reason we are actually not changing the signature. Signature in the sense this has to be as is, and we are going to discuss this in the next session. What's the signature of this? But this has to be the same as is for now. So execution starts from main method. JVM knows that it has to start the instruction from this method. So this is the reason we are writing main method in our class. So in order to print something, what we usually do, we do system.out.println, right? So the shortcut is sys and then o system.out.println. So this O and then control space. So this is a shortcut to have it system.out.println. Say for example, I wanted to print some 10 as a number. So this we have seen. How do we run it? And remember, in the last session, we also discussed each line of statement in Java should end with a delimiter semicolon. So this is very important. So this actually states that so this is end of my statement. Please treat this as my end of statement is what we are instructing Java, right? So how to run this program? Right click, run as Java application. So if you see, we see Java application here, right? Let me click on this. So you can see output in the console as 10. So if you get your console like this, you can drag it here if you want it at the end, at the below. So you can drag it like this and put it here. So 10, right? So let me show you. What did we say? Main method, right? So say for example, I'll call this as some main one, or I can call it as anything, right? Say for example, I am call it as some main one. So now if I click right click, run as, I'll not get the option as Java application. So because JVM has to know where the main method is. But in your class, you don't even have your main method. So it doesn't know where to start the execution from. And this is the reason you're not getting run as Java application. So once I change it back to main method, now JVM identifies it has main method and you get an option called Java application, right? Now let us discuss about the variables. So let me comment this for now. You can even minimize this. Just click on this, it will minimize and you will get a full screen, almost full screen, right? Now, int, say for example, int a equal to, so how do we declare and how do we initialize the variables? So int a, semicolon. This is how you declare a variable. So what do you mean by int a? A is a variable and int is a data type. So int is the data type of that variable a. So we are gonna store information in a which is integer, only integer, right? So even before this, so we need to know how to, the naming conventions of variables. So let us actually discuss the variable name conventions. So these are the variable name conventions. Again, like how we have seen for class name. So variables also has a camel case notation. So, but the only difference here is, so it has to start with a lowercase letters and capitalize the first letter of each subsequent word. So that is what we need to know. Say for example, so it has to be something like, if it is uh, number of say for example, number of chairs. So in such case, we declare it as something like that. So it has to start with lowercase letter and capitalize the first letter of each subsequent word. Of is another word. Number of chairs, 3 words, right? So in the subsequent words in the sense, except the first word, because the first word, it has to start with a lowercase letter and capitalize the first letter of each subsequent word. That is, of is another word. We are starting with a uppercase and C is another word. We are starting with the uppercase letter. So this is what we mean by camel case notation in variables. And avoid single character name. So just now we have seen int a, int b. So we should not be declaring variables like that because it causes confusion. And whenever someone is reading our code, so they doesn't understand why we declared that variable for. So always variable names has to be meaningful and readable. So it has to be something like int age equal to 30, like that, not in egg, something like that. And same as the class name. So no special characters or spaces allowed in the variable names. However, we allow only underscore. Only underscore is allowed for the variable names. And prefix for the Boolean variables. So I have missed Boolean here. So if you see, there is another type called Boolean, which actually stores value true or false. So there is a type called B is a, here B is a variable which is of type Boolean, which can store only true or false. So if we have any flag and we wanted to set on or off, then we can use data type called Boolean. So, and the convention for Boolean variables is it has to have some prefix. Say for example, if I wanted to check something is valid or not, in that case, I can declare that like this. Is valid. So is a prefix, right? So for Boolean variables, we have to have some prefix is valid. has access. So this is has access in the sense it either will have the access or not, right? Is valid. It can either be valid or not valid. So in such cases, so this is the reason we declare Boolean variables like this with a prefix. So these are the major variable name conventions we have to follow while working with variables. Now let's go back to our code. So if you see here int a is a variable which is of data type int, right? Now this is what we call it as declaring the variable. Now how do I assign some value to it? So I have declared some variable, but how do I store some data in it? So this is how you can do it, right? A equal to 10. So this is what we call it as initializing the variable. So in the first statement, what did we do? We declared the variable. So we declared A as one variable and we said int. We actually set the data type of A as int. Say for example, let's call this as age. So it has to be meaningful, right? So let's start it now itself. So age is one variable. It has to store some data. So we are storing some data. So the first time when we are assigning some value, that is what we call it as initializing the variable. Now we have some value. We declared a variable and we initialized the variable. Right now we wanted to see this on the console output. So how do we do that? System.out.println again. Just have this variable here. Now run as Java application. If you see, you'll get the output as 10, right? So one second, let me get this here. Okay, anyway, let it be on the left. So you can see, but when we drag it, so it has to come like this. It's up to us. So it can be on left, right, in the below, anywhere, but we have to get the console output. So here you see 10, right? Now, say for example, I wanted to modify the value in age. Age is a variable, right? So it can vary. So the value can vary. So I wanted to now modify the value. So I just modified the value to 30. So now I'm going to print the value again. So what value it has to print now? So let's see that. So if you see, it has now displayed 30 because so when we declared age as integer data type and when we initialize to 10, then we are trying to display it, the value is 10. Till that time, the value of age is 10. But here we are assigning some other new value, meaning we are updating or modifying or we can say manipulating the value for the variable age and we have assigned a new value which is 30, right? So this is the reason the old value 10 got overridden. This is we call it as assignment. So we are assigning value here. First time when we are assigning, this is also called assigning, but when we are doing it for the first time, it is called as initializing the variable. And in the subsequent operations, whenever we are updating the value of the variable, then it is called as assignment. So 10 is gone. Once we assign some other new value to the data type int or any variable, then the old value is overridden. It is no more. It is updated with a new value. So at any point of time, variable can hold only the one value, new value, the updated value it can hold. Now, let me show you the other type. Like here, we have seen declaring the variable and initializing the variable, right? In two ways. Now, let me comment this out. We'll call this as I'll just say this as declaration. Okay, anyway, we said right, declare variable and initialize variable. Yeah, we can leave it here. And I just comment it out. And I'm going to show you the same example. Int age equal to 30. So what's the difference between the earlier one and this one? So we can declare and initialize the variable in the same single statement. So in the single statement, we can declare and initialize the value for the variable. So let's run this program and check. So it prints 30. So meaning we can declare and also initialize the variable in single statement. This is other way. So we can declare the variable and initialize the value to it in two statements, or we can do it in one go. In one single statement, we can declare and also initialize the value to it. Now, say for example, I have some three variables. So as what we can do, I can do like I wanted to declare, I wanted to you have three variables in my program. So what I can do, I can declare and also initialize like this in three statements, right? According to this syntax. So we can declare and also initialize the value to these variables like this. As I have three variables, I did this in three statements, right? Now, the same way, if we are actually declaring same variable of same data type. So if you see A, B, C here are variables of same data type int. So in such case, we don't need to do like this. So the same can be repeated or done like this. A, B, C. Say for example, you wanted to declare three variables. So int A, B, C. So you can do it in one go, like int A, comma, B, comma, C. So this is just a warning. The value of the local variable C is not used. So whenever you get a red color, so when you hover over it, editor or IDE, Eclipse IDE, right? So Eclipse IDE actually tells you what has to, if there are any errors, it actually gives you what the error is and also it suggests how to fix it. In the same way, if there is any yellow underline, it is a warning. We can just ignore it or we can just fix it if you want. The value of the local variable C is not used is what it is saying. You can just ignore it because we just declared it. We never use it in our code, right? That is what it is saying. Int A, B, C. So if you see as A, B, C are variables of same data type, we can declare it in the single statement. Declaring variables of same data type separate. And here we can declare variables of same data type in single statement. And also we need the values for it, right? So values, we can do it like this in separate statements. So we declare variables of same set data type in single statement here, if you observe. As we know, all the variables are of same data type. We can declare them in single statement and then initialize values to those variables like this independently. And you can even check the output here. System dot out dot println A, B, and C. So let's execute this program. You can comment out this as well. Now you can see the output of A, B, C. A, B, C, as they are of same data type, we declared it in single statement. We initialize the values to those variables and also we have displayed them on the console. And we can do the same in a single statement as well. So here, if you see, we have declared variables in one single statement and initialize the values to those variables in three statements, right? Instead of that, we can have it something like this. See, everything got, optimized. So it is saying it is already there. You can just comment this out. And we can display the values here like this. So this is the more optimized one. So you can see uh, everything got completed in one single statement. So declaring and initializing of multiple variables. Because these are of same data type, we are doing this. We are declaring them and also initializing the values to these variables in single statement. These are the different ways of declaring and initializing values to the variables. And also, if you see, we are again like repeating the display. Like if you wanted to display the value of A, B, C, we are doing that in three statements, right? So this we can do it in single statement as well. How can we do that? Value A. So if you remember in the last session, we had discussed this. How to concatenate within system.out.println is we can use the plus symbol. So A plus, I need some blank space in order to differentiate the value of A and B, then plus B, plus then I wanted to have some blank space, then C. So whenever I wanted to concatenate all these, so we need to use symbol called plus. You should not get confused this with the operator plus. Operator plus actually what it does the sum of two numbers. But within system.out.println, when we are using this, this is used as the concatenation. So what it is concatenating in this case is the values of A and then followed by blank space, B followed by blank space and then value of C. Now we can see everything got displayed in a single line. So we started with like this, right? So declaring variable in one, declaring variable with its data type and then initializing it. We can do it in two statements or we can do it in single statement. Both while the time of declaring itself, we can initialize the variable. And then we have seen like how can we do it for the same data type. So multiple variables of same data type, we can declare it in single line and we can initialize it independently. Or we can do it in single statement, like declaring the multiple variables of same data type in, and also initializing the values to it in a single statement and also displaying the values of them in a single statement. So this is how we can actually declare and initialize the variables of the same data type, multiple variables of same data type in Java. Now let us discuss more about data types. Before going on to that, so are you clear on this? Is this clear till now? Okay. All right. Now let's go to the next topic called data types. We'll discuss more on data type now. This is all about variables. Now we'll discuss about data types in Java. So what did we say? Data type represents the type of the data. Data type represents the type of data. What type of data the variable will is going to hold. So what's the type of data that we declare a variable, and just declaring the variable, if you see here, say for example, in our first case, or say for example, I'll just say x equal to 100. If you say this, so see here what Java says. So it says x cannot be resolved by a variable because it doesn't know the data type of it. Or if you just say x, so it doesn't know the data type of it. So this cannot be resolved. Please, provide the data type for that variable is what it is saying, right? So because data type represents the type of data, what it will be, what it holds, right? So we definitely need to have a data type declared when we are declaring a variable so that JVM knows like what data will be stored in that variable. Mainly, there are two types of data types in Java: primitive data type and non-primitive data type. Primitive data types and non-primitive data types. So, what are primitive data types? So, primitive data types are the fixed data types by Java. So, this we have to use it as is. Like, in order to store the integer type of data, we do have three types. We do have short, int, and long. We have seen integer data type till now. So we also have byte, short, int, and long. These are the data types which can store the numeric data, integer type of data, numbers. So what's the difference between all these that we are going to discuss? But these are all the different data types available which can store integer type of data. Next, if I wanted to store some decimal numbers which have like decimal points, then we do have two data types called float and double. So we do have two data types, float and double, which we can use it to declare the variables when we wanted to store the decimal numbers in it. And this we have seen. In order to store single character, we need to declare that variable data type as char. Char represents character. Character is one character. So, and also we discussed that it has to be enclosed in single quotes. And last primitive data type is Boolean. Boolean is it's a kind of switch on or off, or we can say it as true or false. So Boolean accepts only true or false. So these are the different primitive data types we have. Now let us see an example on these primitive data types. So I'm just creating a new class here. If you see on the package, I will right click new class. And I'm gonna name my package, my class name as data type example. I'll take the main method, finish. So first let us see the numeric data types or integer data types. We can call it as integer data types again. So what are those? These are the numeric integer data types, right? So let's see one by one. So I'll call something like, so in order to store byte, so say for example, I'll say byte b equal to say something like 3, right? What is byte? Byte is a numeric data type which can actually store data within the range minus 128 to 127. So before that, let's actually discuss, what the range of each variable, each data type is. So we discussed about primitive data types, right? So in the same way, we do have non-primitive data types as well. So what are non-primitive data types is? So string is non-primitive data type. So array list, hash map, objects, all these are non-primitive data types. So these are not defined by users, but these are defined by the users. But these are actually already declared by Java, defined by Java, and we just need to use this data types as is. But non-primitive data types are the ones which we can actually objects, hash map, all these are like, we can actually define, user can define and assign the values to them, right? So this is the this is about primitive data types and non-primitive data types. And we need to know one more thing, like why we need to have the data types. So this like we have seen, why do I need to have the data type declared to a variable? We know that JVM has to know what data it has to hold, right? But still, say for example, I can declare any variable and store any value, right? But Java doesn't know what data type it holds, right? So because why we need to declare the data type for a variable is because it actually stores some information, right? So whenever some variable or anything, if it wants to store some information, it needs some storage. It needs some storage to store something, right? Storage can be like inside, the size of the storage can be in any unit, right? So here, in order to store the information in variables also, it needs some variables, need some storage. So JVM has to reserve some space for these variables. So how can it reserve some space for the variables? This is based on the actual data variable is gonna hold. So, you know, say for example, let me show it here. Say for example, I'm declaring A and I'll just say it as int, or I will not say anything. Then how much space it has to reserve for A, JVM doesn't know, because what data A holds, based on only that we can actually reserve space. So this is the reason JVM needs data type, right? Based on the type of data only, how much space it can reserve, JVM can know, right? So this is the reason we need to declare variables, data types, variables, and the data types for the variables, right? Now let us see the size and also, the range of these data types, primitive data types. Yeah, coming to the primitive data type byte. So byte actually stores 1 byte. So in order to byte is a data type which stores integer values, and what's the size it needs. So when we declare byte, so JVM knows that variable to reserve 1 byte of space. So what is byte? 1 byte is 8 bits. What is 1 bit? So 1 bit in machine language can be either 0 or 1. So whenever we call it as bit can be 0 or 1. And 8 such bits form 1 byte. So this is how in bits only, in all zeros and ones, only computer can understand the language. That language we call it as machine language. So machine language will only be in zeros or ones. So either 0 or 1. So based on this, the machine code will be there, and that's how the machine can understand. And that we call it as 1 bit. 1 bit can be either 0 or 1. 8 such bits form 1 byte. 8 such bits form 1 byte, right? And such bytes, 1 byte is required for byte data type. Byte is also a data type which actually needs 1 byte of storage. And what it can store? It can store the integer whole numbers, integers within the range -128 to 127. So it can't store more than this. Like if you say, if you declare byte and if you wanted to store 140, 150, it can't store. So this is the range. It can be between 128 -128 to 127. That's the range of byte. And what's the storage it needs is 1 byte. That is 8 bits. Also remember, 4 bits, we call it as one nibble. So 1 byte, when we declare a data type as byte, it needs storage as 1 byte. JVM knows if you declare a variable as byte, it knows I have to reserve 1 byte for this variable is what it knows. And it also, this range is also very strict. Like we can only store the values -120 to 127 in this data type called byte. And in the same way, we do have another data type called short, like the size of it is 2 bytes. So it can store you can see the range here. So how do we remember this range? So each data type has its own range, right? So how do we remember is, it's simple. So say for example, this is 2 power 8 bits, right? One byte is 8 bits, and byte is actually storing, the storage required for one byte data type is 1 byte, right? So, and 1 byte, we know it is 8 bits, right? So the range of it will be 2 power 7 to 2 power 7 minus 1. So what is 2 power 7? So 2 power 7 is 128, right? So minus 2 power 7 to 2 power 7 minus 1. How did we get this 7 is, so 1 byte storage is 8 bits, if you see. So 8 minus 1, this is how we got this number 7. So minus 2 power 7 to 2 power 7 minus 1. What is 2 power 7? 128. So here is the number 128. And what is the n value? 2 power 7 minus 1. 2 power 7 is 128. 128 minus 1 is 127. So this is how the range has been defined for this data type byte. And in the same way, short. Short is 2 bytes. Again, 2 bytes is how many bits? 8 into 2 is 16. 16 bits. So it will be minus 2 power 15 to 2 power 15 minus 1. 1 less than the number of bits. This number, right? 2 power 15 is 32768. So minus 32768 to 2 power 15 minus 1. 32768 minus 1. That is 32761. So this is how the range has been defined. Why I'm saying this is, you don't need to, by heart it, or, keep it in mind like the numbers. You don't need to by heart these numbers. So you just need to know short needs 2 bytes of storage. Byte data type needs 1 byte. In order to store short data type, it needs 2 bytes of memory. JVM has to reserve 2 bytes of memory in 2 bytes of memory it has to reserve, right? And what's the range? So range, you don't need to actually remember it. Just, if you know 2 bytes, then 2 bytes is 16 bits, because 1 byte is 8 bits. 8 into 2, 16. So based on this, you can actually form this formula and calculate the value. And in the same way, int. Int is a integer data type again. It is the data type of it is int, and it needs, whenever you declare a variable as int, it needs 4 bytes of memory, 4 bytes of space, right? So as it is 4 bytes, so again 4 into 8, 1 byte is 8 bits, 4 into 8, 32. So again, the number here will be, instead of 15, it will be 32 minus 1, that is 31. So 2 power 31, the value of it is this one, 2147483, whatever it is, right? So the value of this is this. So based on our requirement, we need to declare the variables. Like if you wanted to store a huge number, big number, right? Then I'll declare it as int. If I think that my value will fall between this range, I'm going to store it as int. Otherwise, I can store it in the short itself if my number is going to be small. If the numbers I'm going to store in my variable are very small, then I can store it in the short data type itself. I will declare my variable as short itself, so that it occupies only small amount of memory. So this is about the int. And if you wanted to store really long number, then we call that data type as long. So we declare a variable and we'll name that data type as long, so that it stores long value, like a very big value. So you can see here, as this is very big value, it needs 8 bytes of memory. So the size of it is 8 bytes. JVM has to reserve 8 bytes of memory if you declare a variable as long. So you have to declare a variable as long only if required. And the range again. So what is 8 into 8? 64. So 64 minus 1 is 63. So minus 2 power 63 to 2 power 63 minus 1. So when I said 2 power 15 minus 1, so it has to be like this. First 2 power 15 has to be calculated and then minus 1. Same goes for the all other ranges as well. So this is the range of long. Now coming to the decimal numbers. So these are all the integer numbers still here. Now coming to the decimal numbers. So if we wanted to store fractional numbers, then we need to declare the variables as float. And float, the size of float is 4 bytes. And the precision is 7 decimal digits. 7 decimal digits. So after decimal point, you can store the precision 7 numbers. So if you know that, if you have the precision under 7 or equal to 7, then we can declare the variable as float. And in same way, double is like more than float. Like if I wanted to store decimal number, which I need like more precision, like after decimal point, if I wanted to store 15 decimal digits, then the variable has to be declared as double. And double data type needs 8 bytes of memory. This is about the decimal numbers. And coming to Boolean data type. Boolean data type is true or false. So we just need one bit. So within one bit, we can actually know the information of Boolean data type, whether it can be true or false. So it needs only one bit. And coming to char data type. Char data type needs 2 bytes of memory. 2 bytes is 16 bits. It needs 16 bits. It stores a single character. We know this, right? It stores a single character, and the amount of memory required when we declare a variable as data type char is 2 bytes. So this is the chart of data type and what's the amount of memory is required when you declare a variable as the specific data type and the range of it. Instead of description, range or description, we can call this as range or description. Range is what's the range of values the specific data type can hold. That is what we call it as a range. So these are all about the information about the primitive data types. Now we'll go back to our example. So you can see here byte. I declared variable b as byte, right? Byte, and I'm storing some value. I wanted to print this value. Let's do that. So instead of B, C like this, let's actually have some meaningful names. Say for example, some age of a toddler. And whenever we declare a variable, we have to look for the range as well. So if it falls within this range, yes, 3 is a number which falls within this range. So I can declare my variable as byte. And also, I wanted to display it on the console. Let's see now. Yeah, it actually prints 3, right? So this is about the byte. Now, if I wanted to declare, have the data type as short. So let's see short data type. Short can be, what's the range? Short is -3276, right? So it can be a small book or, book size. Say, for example, I wanted to store some value called 250. So I know it will not exceed more than this range. So I'm not going to have it as int. I'm not, at the same time, I'm not going to declare that as byte because I know book pages can vary, can exceed this number and most probably might not exceed this range, short range. So this is the reason I'm declaring my variable as short. So the shortcut for system.out.println is SYSO, and then you need to press Control and hit space and hit enter. And we can see the value here, right? The value of short data type. Now, if I wanted to see integer value, integer we have already seen, but let's see again. So if I wanted to store some city population, then I can store it as integer. because the value could be in thousands or lakhs in some cases, right? So I wanted to declare my city population variable as integer. So even if I wanted to, you don't need to copy it like this, how I was doing earlier. So you wanted to print variable city population. So you can just say CIT, some one, two or three characters, and then again hit control space. It will suggest you what variable you wanted to use there. Just select the variable city population and then hit enter. Whatever variable you wanted to select, after pressing control space, you can select that and then hit enter. So based on the purpose of your variable, you have to decide your data type. So approximately you can decide what would be your data type. Based on that, you can declare your data type. Right? This is all about the numeric data type. We do have long as well. So when we wanted to store really long number, right? Say for example, I wanted to store a big number like this. So this will definitely not fit into the integer range. So we can see it clearly. Integer range, it will not be sufficient to store very big numbers. So in such case, we have no option except declaring that variable as long. So this could be some, when do we have such big numbers? Say, for example, I wanted to store distance to star from Earth, right? So in such cases, we can declare our variables as long. All that you need to know is if the range, you need to know the approximate range your variable is gonna hold. Based on that, you need to actually specify the data type. So if you see here, after I declare this variable long, it is showing us some error. Let's read that error. So if you see the literal, the number of whatever number we have, big number of type int is out of range. So it is clearly giving that error. The literal is the value of type int. So it is thinking it is integer, is out of range because it knows, right? So how can it identify from the above one and here, this one? So both are seems to be like an integer, right? But how can GVM differentiate this is integer and this is long? It can't, right? So this just says that, yeah, I identified this as an integer, but this is out of my range, is what it is saying, even though you declared it as long, right? So in such case, what we need to do is we need to specify the symbol. So in order to specify, this is long and this is not integer. So as this is value, which seems like an integer, right? So we need to say that this is not an integer. So this is a long value. I wanted you to treat it as a long value. Please treat this as a long value is what we are saying to JVM. So how do we say that is by specifying the symbol L. So it could be uppercase L or it could be lowercase L. But in most of the cases, we use, as a best practice, we use uppercase L just to differentiate between number n and L, lowercase L. So both are seems to be in the same way, right? Very close. Say this is one, and this is lowercase L. So just to differentiate that, as a best practice, we use uppercase L. Just to specify that this is long. Yeah, we can see the value here. So what if I can say long, but I can store some value as, 56 like this. Let's say, for example, just 6. So what happens? So in this case, it is not throwing error if you see. This is because it knows 6 is an integer, right? So it just knows integer and it actually assigns 6 value to this variable. So by default, so all the numeric data types are treated as the integers unless and until you specify it, right? So by default, numeric data types are treated as an integer. So it didn't throw you the error. But what happens when you declare a small value, like within the value within a small range? If you assign it to a variable of type long or any big range or big size data type, if you assign a small value, what happens is, so let me explain you. Say for example, this is memory in JVM, right? So JVM actually what it has to do, based on the variable you declare, it has to reserve the space. Say for example, it is short, so it will actually reserve some space, because it knows if it is byte, it knows it has to reserve 1 byte. Say for example, it is short, it knows it will reserve 2 bytes, 1 byte, 2 bytes. This is for short, and this is for, sorry, this is byte, this is short. And if it is integer, it knows it has to reserve 4 bytes. If it is long, it will be assigning 8 bytes. So what happens, even though if you are storing a number like 6 or 10, 100 within the small range, but you still declare it as long, what happens? JVM doesn't know that what value you are going to store in it. But as you declare it as long, it reserves more space in memory, 8 bytes of space in memory. But you are actually storing the value within the range which is equal to short or byte, right? Then this amount of memory, so it will be waste, right? So we are actually wasting the memory. So it declared 8 bytes of memory as you declared as long, but you are actually storing a small number which could actually be a byte or short, which could have been completed with like 1 or 2 bytes of memory. It could have been done, our work could have been done. But as we declared long, like 8 bytes of memory will be reserved in memory, but you might be using only 1 byte or 2 bytes. All these 6 or 7 bytes of memory will be wastage of memory. So we should always, when you are writing the code, you have to you have to keep in mind, you have to optimize the code in such a way that you use very less memory, because you might end up with out of memory errors. Because if your program is using a lot of memory, right? So in computer there could be multiple tasks happening. So each task might need some memory, right? If your program itself is needs, or if it is actually taking up a lot of memory, then it will be a problem for other tasks. And JVM actually says out of memory. If it exceeds the memory it has assigned, right? So you always need to keep in mind when we are writing a code. So when we are declaring the variables and the data types of the variables, mainly the data type of the variable when you are declaring, so you have to keep in mind, if it is, the range, at least we have to know the approximate range. And based on that only we should be actually declaring the data types. And mainly when you are declaring data types of, the size which is more like huge, like 4 bytes, 8 bytes. So we have to keep in mind, and we have to be careful. If it is really required, only then we have to declare it as a big data type, like int, long, like that. Or else, if our work is gonna be completed with byte or short, then we should be declaring it as those data type, as it will store less amount of memory, as it needs less amount of memory. So this we need to keep in mind. All right. So this is all about the numeric data types. Now let's discuss about the decimal numbers. So we know decimal numbers are the numbers which will have the decimal point and a precision after that, right? So say for example, I wanted to show some product price. Product price would never be like most probably it will never be an integer, like, right? It could sometimes be something like this. So in such case, as it has a decimal point, so we can't declare this variable as any other any numeric data types which we discussed till now, right? So it has to be declared as float. It has to be declared as float. But again, if you see, it has an error. So see here what it says: type mismatch, cannot convert from double to float. So what happens, what the error mean here is, earlier what happened when we tried to, assign some Okay, let's assign some big value to it as it is a long, right? So when we try to assign long some value without L, so it says I can't actually store this int because this is out of range. It was is what it was saying, right? Because integer was the default data type for any numeric data type. So in the same way, double is a data type which is the default for the decimal numbers, decimal data types. So this is what it is saying. Cannot convert from double to float is what it is saying. So in such case, so we need to specify that, hey, this is not double value, treat this as float value is what we need to say. Tell JVM, right? But how do we say that? So same as how we said with a symbol L that it is a long value. So in the same way, we are going to say that it is a float value using a symbol with F. So it can be, again, it could be uppercase F or small case F. So this way it will know that it's a float value. It's not a double value, it's a float value. So this we need to specify definitely, because if you see here, what is the size of float? Float is 4 bytes. Double is 8 bytes. So if you do not specify it, it will actually store it in double, which will actually occupy 8 bytes of memory, right? So if you declare it as 4 byte float, it actually occupies, so the variable occupies 4 bytes of space on memory. So whenever we are having something like item price, product price, so most of the cases we can actually store it in the float, because float itself gives you the flexibility of having precision seven decimal digits, meaning you can have 7 digits after the decimal point. So it could even be something like this. Till this point, we can have the float value, right? If you wanted to store more precision, what do I mean by precision is whatever the decimal digits comes after the decimal point, the number of decimal digits that comes after the decimal points. This is what we call it as a precision. So if you see, I already have 7 decimal digits here. So if I need more precision, then we go for double, or else float should be sufficient enough to store the values. So system.out.println, and then I'm printing the product price. You can see the product price here. Again, it needs literal, literal needs F or F, right? Next comes double. Say for example, I wanted to store some values which are like has to be accurate with the precision. Then I can store it as a double value. Say for example, I wanted to store something like this, which has precision more than 7 decimal digits. So as per our, this chart, data type chart, so more than 7 decimal digits, I know it will, the precision has to be accurate, and it will be having more than, it has to store more than 7 decimal digits. In that case, we declare the variable as double. So if you see, this is not an error. This is an yellow underlined one. So there is a difference between red underline and yellow underlined ones. So this is yellow underline one. This is a warning. It just says the value of this variable is not used. So we're gonna use it now. So if you see, when I type some 2 or 3 characters, and then if I type control space, then I will get an options which what I have to select, right? So I wanted to select accuracy. This is the double data type variable, and I am storing it some value in it, and I do not specify any any symbol to it, because by default decimal numbers the data type is treated as double, and it is optional. So first let's execute this. So if I run this program, so I can see the value of this variable which is of type double, right? And yeah, this is optional. You can even specify D as well. symbol D, specifying that my value of my value is double. Treat this value as double. When you wanted to say that, you can specify D, or that's optional because by default it is specified as double anyway, right? This is about the numeric data types. Now I wanted to store some student grade. So in such case, I have to declare what's the condition for it. So it has to be enclosed in single characters and it has to be char data type. This is another data type, primitive data type, character data type, which can only store single character. So single character in the sense, it could be alphabets, it could be numbers even. So I can even say like this, I can even store some symbols as well. Say for example, I wanted to store something like this. I can store it any symbols as well. It has to be one character. It could be anything. So the data type of it is char. We can see the value here, right? And the last one is Boolean. So say for example, is it valid? I wanted to check that. So in such case, I will declare my variable data type as Boolean. So say for example, is valid is true. I wanted to use this variable where I wanted to say if it is valid or not, something. So I can either store true or false. Boolean allows only true or false. So we didn't actually display it on the console. So it says true. So in the same way, if I modify it to false, so the value turns as false. See? So this is all about the primitive data types. And string is a special type, right? So if you see string, I can say string, something like this. So string is a sequence of characters. It is not a single character, if you observe. It's a sequence of character. So it has to be specified in double quotes. And the type of it has to be, data type has to be string, right? So this is not a primitive data. This is non-primitive data, but just I'm saying like string is a sequence of characters it has to store. So it has to be enclosed in double quotes and the data type has to be specified as string. So this is all about the data types. So what's the difference between primitive data types and non-primitive data types is primitive data types are defined by Java. So if you observe, all these are defined by Java. So we are just using them. This is the reason you can see all these are keywords. So these are, mentioned in the red color or maroon color, whatever color it is, right? So these are the defined by Java. Whereas non-primitive data types, we are going to learn all these non-primitive data types as well in the upcoming sessions. So these are called as non-primitive data types, and these are defined by the user. Right? Yeah, these are defined by the user. And coming to the size. So these are fixed size. Primitive data types are fixed size because we have seen this chart, right? So whenever you declare a variable like this, data type, float or in any data type, right? So it reserves. So JVM knows how much space it has to reserve in memory. It knows because each data type is fixed by Java, and it knows how much size or how much space it has to be allocated in memory. So size is fixed in primitive, but in non-primitive it is not. So it can have it varies depending on our usage. And the default values. So we also need to know the default values. So primitive data types do have the default values. So we'll see that now. But non-primitive data types, the default value of non-primitive data types is null. So let me put it here. The default value is null for any non-primitive data type. And we'll see the default value for the primitive data types. Let's actually put it here. So what are the differences? I'm just putting it like this. Defined by Java and defined by the user. By Java in the sense primitive, by user is non-primitive. String is a non-primitive data type. String is a non-primitive data type. I just explained it here because we usually use string most of the places. I just wanted to say you that it's a sequence of characters. I just wanted to compare it with char. So this is the reason I just used it. But still string is considered as non-primitive data type. Yeah, coming to the differences between primitive and non-primitive, it is primitive is defined by Java and non-primitive is defined by user. Right now, yeah, and the size is fixed size, variable size. Default values. So the default values for non-primitive is always null, and primitive data types, each data type has its own default value that we will see it now. So the default value of byte is 0. So the default value of byte is 0. So meaning, so if you do not specify any value, so it will be actually as in a value called 0. So in the same way, short. Default value of short is also 0. Most of the integer data types, right? The default value will be 0. Even for long, it is 0. All the integer data types, it is 0. And for float also it is 0 with a decimal point 0. Same goes for the double as well. For character, it is null character and it is specified using Unicode. We'll discuss what Unicode is, what are the ASCII code. We'll discuss in the coming sessions. But for now, you can just remember it as the default value for char is null character. This is represented with this Unicode. And the default value for Boolean is false. These are the default values. So this is all about the data types in Java. So whenever we are seeing, whenever you need to know about the data types, so you need to know, so it is, if it is a primitive or non-primitive data type, and if it is primitive, we need to know this chart because we need to remember this. You don't need to remember the range because it is hard to remember these numbers, but you can easily remember the size in this order. So byte is 1 byte, short 2 bytes, and so on, right? So because you need to know this, you need to remember or you need to refer this. So whenever you are declaring your variables and depending on the range of values you're storing, you're gonna store in your variable, approximately you'll be knowing the value at range. So according to that, you need to actually declare your data types for your variables. So this is very important. And difference between primitive and non-primitive data types is also it's very important interview question again, right? So primitive data types are the data types defined by Java, whereas non-primitive data types are defined by user. And primitive data types are fixed size. So you can see these are all already fixed. We know the size of this, but non-primitive data types, it varies depending on our usage. We'll see that, what are the non-primitive data types. When we are discussing about the different non-primitive data types, we'll see how it varies, right? And the default values. So the default value for non-primitive data type is null, is always null. Whereas the default values for the primitive data types, it depends. It depends on the data type. Mostly you can see if the numeric data type is 0, right? So this is all about the data types. So is it clear till here? So if it is clear, then actually we can wrap up the session. So in this session, we have learned like what are variables, what are data types. So, variable is a container which can hold the data, which can hold the information, different kinds of information it can hold. And what kind of, depending on what kind of information it's gonna hold, uh, we actually declare its data type. So the type of data, what it holds, depending on that. So we will be declaring the data types for those variables. So that is what we discussed. And we have seen an example on variable names. And while declaring the variables, so we have seen the variable name conventions, and followed by we have seen the different types of data types, mainly two types of data types, primitive data types and non-primitive data types. And what are all the primitive data types we have discussed, and also we have seen the examples of the same, right? So non-primitive data types are also called as derived data types or reference types. So this is what we discussed, right? And yeah, this is all about the variables and data types. And also, so let me put the variable definition here. Variable is a container which can store different kinds of information like numbers, text, and more. And also, if you see here, like going back to variables, so if you see here, we are declaring the variable, we are assigning or initializing the value to it, and also retrieving the value. So this way, we can actually give a new definition to variable based on what we have learned. So we can say variables enable you to store, because it is storing the value here, right? It is storing the value. We can manipulate. We have seen this. We can manipulate the value, and also we can retrieve the value. Retrieve the value is reading the value, fetching the value. So that is what we call it as retrieve. So we can store, we can manipulate and retrieve the value. Based on that, I have also provided a definition of variable. Variables enable you to store, manipulate and retrieve data. So this is all about the variables and data types. So yeah, if you have any questions, you can ask now.